Calder Rowan woke with a green arm around his waist and no memory of getting married. For several seconds, he did not open his eyes. He listened instead. Steel wheels sang beneath the floor. Rain whispered against glass. Somewhere beyond the thin wall, a locomotive whistle stretched through the night like a lonely animal calling across the mountains. The midnight express was still moving. So was the woman behind him. Her breath warmed the back of his neck. One powerful thigh rested between his legs beneath the blanket, and her palm lay flat against his bare stomach. Calder's linen shirt was open to the waist. The woman's fingers were green, strong, and decorated with 3 thin silver rings. There was a 4th ring on her left hand. It matched the gold band on his own. Calder opened his eyes. The private sleeping compartment was dim, illuminated by a blue night lamp and flashes of moonlight between the trees outside. A red evening dress hung from the brass luggage hook. His charcoal coat lay on the floor beside a pair of high black boots that were definitely not his. He turned carefully. The woman sleeping beside him was an orc. She had rich olive green skin, heavy black braids spread across the pillow, pointed ears, and 2 small ivory tusks rising elegantly from her lower lip. A thin gold chain circled one tusk. Even asleep, she looked formidable. A pale scar crossed the outside of her left eyebrow, and her bare green shoulders showed above the blanket. Calder stared at her. Her amber eyes opened. Neither moved. The orc woman looked at his face, then at the arm she had wrapped around him. Her eyes dropped to his open shirt and the hand resting on his stomach. She removed it slowly. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was low and rough with sleep. "I was hoping you knew." She pushed herself upright, taking most of the blanket with her. Beneath it, she wore a sleeveless black underdress that fitted her powerful, feminine body. Calder looked away quickly. "You looked longer than necessary," she said. "I was identifying evidence." "Of what?" He lifted his left hand. The gold ring caught the blue light. The orc woman stared at it. Then she looked down at her own matching band. "No," she said, a confident beginning. "I am not married. Neither am I. You are wearing a wedding ring. So are you." Her eyes narrowed. "Did you put it there?" "If I possessed that kind of courage, I suspect you would have noticed." She glanced at the bed. "I noticed something." Calder felt heat reach his face. The woman swung her legs to the floor and stood. She was tall, perhaps an inch above him when he was on his feet, and built like someone who considered locked doors a temporary inconvenience. The black underdress ended below her knees. A knife sheath was strapped to one green thigh. It was empty. Calder found the knife inside his right boot. They looked at each other again. "I would remember giving you that," she said. "I would remember accepting it." "What is the last thing you remember?" Calder sat upright, testing his head. There was no pain, no dryness in his mouth, and none of the sickness that followed too much wine. His thoughts were clear until a certain point, and then they simply ended. "Boarding at Greyhaven," he said. 9:40 in the evening. I ate dinner alone. I was carrying a brown leather case. What was inside? Something valuable. That is not an answer. You have not given me your name. She held his gaze for a moment. "Runa?" Calder. "Your case?" Still not an answer. One of her tusks showed as her mouth tightened. "My last memory is entering the dining carriage shortly before 10. I was wearing that dress." She pointed toward the red gown hanging from the hook. Its low neckline glittered with rain-damp beads. One shoulder strap had been repaired with black thread. "You changed after the wedding," Calder said. "If there was a wedding." Someone had pinned a folded document to the compartment door with a white rose. Neither had noticed it. Runa crossed the room first and tore it free. Calder moved beside her while she unfolded the paper. The royal rail seal appeared at the top. Beneath it were two names written in black ink: Calder Rowan, Runa Valistone. The document declared that they had freely entered a lawful marriage at 11 minutes before midnight in the observation carriage of the Midnight Express. It carried their signatures, the conductor's signature, and the marks of 12 witnesses. At the bottom, someone had drawn a small heart around the official stamp. "Is that your signature?" Calder asked. Runa studied it. "Yes." "Mine too." She read the declaration again. "Freely entered." "That is reassuring." "Is it?" The train swayed around a curve. Runa's bare shoulder pressed against Calder's arm. Neither stepped away. If you enjoy original fantasy romances filled with mystery, danger, and two unlikely hearts forced closer together, you can support the channel and discover more stories at https://www.patreon.com/cw/talesfromorc. Now, let us return to Calder and Runa, married for only a few hours and already hiding from the truth of their wedding night. A knock sounded at the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Rowan?" called an elderly voice. "Are you awake?" Runa's head turned slowly toward Calder. "Do not smile," she warned. "I would never." He was already smiling when she opened the door. The night conductor stood in the corridor wearing a navy uniform with brass buttons. He held a silver breakfast tray, though it was barely 2 in the morning. When he saw them together, his tired face brightened. "There you are, the newlyweds." Runa folded her arms. "Tell us what happened." The conductor's smile weakened. "You do not remember?" "Begin with the wedding," Calder said. The old man looked between them. "You asked me to perform it. Both of you. You were completely sober. I asked 3 times because the lady appeared ready to throw anyone from the train who questioned her judgment." "That sounds possible," Calder said. Runa elbowed him. The conductor continued. "You exchanged rings purchased from the jeweler in carriage 4. You wrote your own vows. Then you kissed so thoroughly that the musicians stopped playing." Calder looked at Runa's mouth. She looked at his. The conductor cleared his throat. "What happened afterward?" Runa asked. "You danced. You spoke privately with the border magistrate. Then you came here shortly after midnight. At 1:15, the train passed through Echo Tunnel. The lamps failed for perhaps 30 seconds. I heard glass break in this carriage, but when I checked, your door was locked, and you told me everything was fine. Did you see either of us after that?" "No." Calder glanced at the clock above the washstand. 2:17. An hour of marriage had vanished. The conductor placed the tray inside. "There is one more thing. Before entering your compartment, you asked me to tell you something if either of you appeared confused." Runa stepped closer. "What?" The old man lowered his voice. "Trust your spouse. Do not allow the railway inspectors to separate you. And open locker 7 before sunrise." Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. 2 men in gray railway uniforms appeared beyond the conductor. Unlike his brass-buttoned coat, theirs carried black glass badges. Runa closed the door at once. She turned the lock and pressed her back against the wood. "Do you trust me?" Calder asked. Her amber eyes moved over his open shirt, wedding ring, and the knife in his boot. "Not yet." "Good. I would question your judgment." Runa's mouth almost curved. Then someone tried the handle. Railway inspection. A man called through the door. Open immediately. Calder buttoned his shirt while Runa pulled the red dress from its hook. Help me, she said. The gown fastened down the back with a row of tiny black hooks. Now? Unless you prefer explaining why your new wife is receiving inspectors in her underdress. Calder moved behind her. Runa gathered her heavy braids over one shoulder, revealing the long green line of her neck and upper back. Calder's fingers found the first hook. The train rocked beneath them. He fastened the gown slowly. Runa looked at him through the mirror above the washstand. You are taking your time. My hands are shaking. From fear of the hooks. Liar. The word sounded unexpectedly intimate. He closed the final hook and let his fingertips rest for one heartbeat at the base of her neck. Runa inhaled. Calder withdrew his hand. Ready, Mrs. Rowan? She turned. The fitted red dress followed every strong curve of her body. Call me that again, and I may use the knife. The knife in my boot? Her gaze dropped. You seem very pleased with that situation. The inspector knocked harder. Runa caught Calder's open collar and pulled him close enough that her tusks nearly touched his cheek. We remember everything, she whispered. We are happily married. We have nothing to hide. Except our names, the wedding, your knife, my missing case, and the reason someone erased our minds. Try to look convincing. You are holding me by the shirt. It helps. She opened the door without releasing him. The two inspectors stared at them. Calder had never attempted to impersonate a newly married man while being threatened by his actual wife. He discovered that it required less acting than expected. Runa's fist remained twisted in his shirt. Her body was close, her amber eyes bright, and the warmth of her green fingers reached his chest through the linen. The taller inspector looked at the marriage certificate in Runa's other hand. Apologies, he said without sounding apologetic. A piece of restricted railway property was removed from the dining carriage. We must search all compartments. At 2 in the morning? Runa asked. The train reaches the border at dawn. Then search after dawn. The inspector placed one polished boot across the threshold. Royal Rail Authority supersedes passenger privacy. Calder lifted his ringed hand. Not under the Spousal Passage Act. A married compartment becomes a shared legal residence until the journey ends. You require the consent of both spouses or a magistrate's written order. He did not know how he remembered that law while forgetting his own wedding. The inspector's gaze sharpened. You are familiar with the act. I read when I am nervous. Runa's eyes flicked toward him. Something in her expression suggested that this answer meant more than he realized. Do you both refuse consent? The inspector asked. Runa turned Calder's face toward hers with one green hand. Darling, she said. The endearment landed like a match against dry paper. Calder covered her hand. I refuse anything that interrupts my wedding night. The inspector looked from Calder's open shirt to Runa's fitted red dress. Doubt remained. Runa solved the problem. She kissed Calder. It began as performance. Her mouth pressed firmly to his, warm and determined, her fingers tightening at his collar. Calder placed one hand at her waist because a husband would. The fabric of her dress was smooth beneath his palm. Then Runa made a quiet sound against his mouth. The performance changed. Calder's other hand moved into the heavy braids at the nape of her neck. Her tusks brushed his lower lip. She angled her face with practiced care, and a sudden, impossible thought moved through him. They had done this before. His body remembered what his mind did not. Runa seemed to feel it too. Her hand slid from his collar to the center of his chest, and the kiss softened instead of ending. The inspector cleared his throat. Neither responded. The second cough was louder. Runa pulled away by less than an inch. Her amber eyes remained fixed on Calder's. They were both breathing too quickly. "Convincing?" she whispered. Disturbingly. The inspectors had already stepped into the corridor. "Locker 7 will be sealed until the border inspection," the taller man said. "Neither of you is to approach the baggage carriage." He realized his mistake as soon as he spoke. Calder smiled. "We never mentioned a locker." Runa closed the door. They listened until the footsteps disappeared. Then they turned toward each other. "You kissed me," Calder said. "We needed to convince them." They were convinced several seconds earlier. "I am thorough." The musicians apparently noticed. Color darkened across her green cheeks. "Do not become unbearable." "Too late. You married me." Runa looked down at the gold band around her finger. The teasing left both of them. Calder reached for the brown leather case that should have been beneath the berth. It was gone. His luggage remained, but its lock had been opened without damage. Runa checked her own bag. A folded black coat, spare boots, and 2 knives lay inside. A third sheath was empty. Beneath the clothes, she found a small tin of cedar oil and a bundle of white wedding roses tied with red thread. One flower was made of black glass. She started to touch it. Calder caught her wrist. "Do not." "Why?" "Black glass badges. Black glass flower. Echo tunnel. Missing memories." Runa crouched beside the bag and examined the artificial rose without contact. A fine gray powder coated its petals. "Dream glass," she said. Calder knew the word. Dream glass was mined beneath the eastern mountains and used in surgical sleep. In small doses, it removed pain. In larger doses, it damaged the hours surrounding exposure. "Someone placed it among the flowers," he said, "after we married. The tunnel lamps failed. Glass broke. We breathed the powder." Runa looked toward the ventilation grill above the berth. One screw was missing. She climbed onto the mattress to inspect it. Calder held the lamp while she removed the remaining screws with the tip of his borrowed knife. "Your hands are steadier now," she said. The hooks were unusually threatening. She gave him a look over her shoulder. Behind the grill, they found a crushed black vial and a narrow copper tube leading into the compartment. Someone had prepared the device before they entered. "They expected us to sleep here," Calder said. "They expected us to marry." That possibility disturbed them more. Runa dropped lightly from the berth. The train lurched at the same moment. Calder caught her by the waist. She landed against him, both hands on his shoulders. "Again?" she asked. "The train has strong opinions about our marriage." His hands remained at her waist. Runa's gaze moved to his mouth. "Do you remember the first kiss?" "No." "Neither do I." "The second one was memorable." She stepped away, but not quickly. They searched the compartment more carefully. Under the mattress, Calder found a folded note written in his own hand. Runa leaned over his shoulder while he opened it. "If you are reading this and cannot remember, the dream glass worked. Trust Runa. She saved your life before you knew her name. Do not give the inspectors the ledger. Locker 7 opens only when both wedding rings touch the lock. And whatever else you forget, remember this. She said yes before she knew marriage would protect her." Calder read the final line twice. Runa took the paper from him. "What does that mean?" "I do not know." "You wrote it." "A more informed version of me wrote it." She turned the note over. A second message appeared on the back in Runa's angular handwriting. If Calder wakes frightened, tell him he was brave when it mattered. If he offers an annulment before sunrise, do not answer until he remembers the dance. Runa became very still. Calder looked at her. Was I going to offer one? Would you? The question was guarded, almost careless, but he heard the fear beneath it. We met 4 hours ago, he said. Apparently that was sufficient. For people who remembered the 4 hours. Runa folded the note with unnecessary precision. Then we find the memories before deciding. Agreed. And until then, the marriage is strategic. Entirely. Their eyes met. Neither mentioned the kiss. The baggage carriage was 6 cars away. Between them stood the dining carriage, a ballroom, 2 sleeping cars, and the private salon reserved for border officials. The inspectors would be watching the corridor. Runa opened the compartment wardrobe and removed Calder's charcoal coat. "Why is my coat in your wardrobe?" he asked. "I was wearing it when we entered." He noticed cedar oil on the collar and a faint line of red lipstick near the lapel. "You wore my coat over your wedding dress." "It may have been cold." "It is lined for mountain weather." "Then past me had excellent judgment." She slipped it over the red gown. The coat was broad on Calder, but it fitted tightly across Runa's shoulders and did not close over her curves. Calder tried not to stare. "Evidence?" she asked. "Overwhelming." She handed him the knife from his boot. "Keep this." "You trust me with it?" "Past me did." Calder tucked the sheath inside his waistband. "And present you?" Runa stepped close and adjusted his open collar, her green knuckles brushing his throat. "Present me is still collecting evidence." They left the compartment hand in hand. It was partly disguise, partly law, and partly because neither wished to admit how wrong it felt to let go. The corridor swayed beneath their feet. Blue lamps illuminated polished wood, brass rails, and dark windows filled with reflected faces. When another passenger appeared, Runa moved closer. Calder placed his hand at the small of her back. "You are enjoying this," she murmured. "A little." She recognized the echo of some forgotten conversation, though she could not know why. Her expression softened. They reached the dining carriage. Every passenger inside began applauding. Runa stopped in the doorway. Calder nearly walked into her. The late-night tables had been pushed aside, leaving a small dance floor scattered with white rose petals. A string quartet slept in their chairs near the windows. Half-empty glasses remained from the celebration. An elderly woman raised her teacup. "The bride and groom return." "Please," Runa said under her breath. "Let the floor open beneath me." Calder leaned close to her pointed ear. "I thought orcs were fearless." "We are. This is different." The elderly woman beckoned them over and produced a small silver camera from her handbag. "You asked me to take this," she said. She handed Calder a freshly developed photograph. It showed Runa and Calder beneath the observation car clock. Runa wore the red gown, and Calder wore his charcoal coat. She had both arms around his neck. He held her at the waist. Their mouths were joined in a kiss that looked neither hurried nor uncertain. Behind them, midnight fireworks reflected across the glass ceiling. Runa touched the edge of the photograph. "We look happy," she said. "We look occupied." She elbowed him again, but kept studying the image. The elderly woman smiled. "I have attended 57 weddings. Yours was the first where the bride proposed during a knife fight." Runa and Calder turned toward her together. "A knife fight?" Calder asked. 2 men entered from the kitchen and demanded the gentleman's case. The bride broke one man's wrist with a champagne bottle. The groom threw the other into a wedding cake that had not yet become a wedding cake. Runa looked impressed despite herself. You fought? Apparently, I dislike sharing dessert. Afterward, the woman continued, the conductor said the inspectors could remove either of you at the border unless you had reciprocal protection. Mr. Rowan possessed human passage rights. Miss Veilstone carried Orc diplomatic immunity. Marriage extended both protections to both people. So I proposed for legal protection, Runa said. The woman's smile became secretive. Not immediately. What happened first? Calder asked. You danced. Runa glanced toward the rose-strewn floor. Did we discuss marriage during the dance? I was not close enough to hear, but when the music ended, Miss Veilstone kissed you. Then she asked whether you had any objections to waking beside an Orc woman for the foreseeable future. Calder looked at Runa. Her green cheeks darkened. And what did I say? You said the foreseeable future sounded too brief. The elderly woman sipped her tea. Silence settled between the newlyweds. Legal strategy, Runa said finally. Entirely, Calder agreed. The string musicians began waking one by one. The violinist recognized the couple and, without being asked, lifted his instrument. The same slow melody from the wedding filled the carriage. Runa's hand tightened around the photograph. Calder offered his palm. We may remember something. You cannot dance. How do you know? Your boots. My boots are innocent. They look apologetic. He kept his hand extended. Runa placed her green fingers in his. The passengers moved back from the floor. Calder drew her into his arms, one hand holding hers and the other settling at her waist. Runa placed her free hand on his shoulder. At first they watched their feet. Then the train found a smooth stretch of rail, and their bodies discovered a rhythm that felt familiar. Calder guided her beneath his raised arm. Runa turned, red skirt widening around her black boots, his charcoal coat opening across her shoulders. When she returned, her back met his chest. His hand spread over her stomach exactly as it had when they woke. Both froze. A memory flashed through Calder. Runa in the same position beneath golden lamps, her head tilted toward him, his mouth near her ear, her laughter when the train swayed and his arms tightened. Then it vanished. Did you see it? Runa whispered. You laughed. At you? Almost certainly. She turned within his arms, their joined hands lowered between them. I remembered your voice, she said. You asked why I carried 3 knives to dinner. What did you answer? 1 for each course. Calder smiled. I understand why I married you. The music slowed. Runa's amber eyes searched his. Do you? He could have made another joke. Instead, he touched the pale scar through her eyebrow. I am beginning to. Her lips parted. The black-badged inspectors entered the far end of the carriage. Runa saw them in the window reflection. She pulled Calder down and kissed him again. This time he knew it was concealment. He also knew the inspectors were too far away to hear anything they said. Neither fact prevented him from kissing her back. Runa's hands moved beneath his coat and around his waist. Calder held her close enough to feel the racing of her heart. When the music ended, their mouths remained together. The passengers applauded. The inspectors continued through the dining carriage without stopping. Runa drew back. We should follow them. Immediately? Yes. Unfortunate. Her thumb brushed his lower lip. Later. The single word promised more than either had intended. They followed the inspectors into the connecting passage. Instead of continuing toward the baggage car, the men entered the private border salon and locked the door. Calder and Runa waited in the shadow between carriages. Through the rain-streaked glass, they could see the dark mountains rushing past. "The baggage carriage is beyond that salon," Calder said. "Roof? In this rain? Are human husbands always this delicate?" "Only newly married ones." Runa opened the exterior maintenance door. Wind tore into the passage. Her black braids whipped behind her, and rain darkened the red fabric at her shoulders. Calder stared at the narrow iron walkway, running along the outside of the train. "There are moments," he said, "when annulment seems reasonable. You have not remembered the dance completely." She stepped outside. Calder followed. The train curved along a mountain ledge. Below them, a river flashed silver beneath the moon. Runa moved first, gripping brass handles fixed to the carriage wall. Calder stayed close behind her. At the gap between cars, the walkway had broken away. Runa tested the distance. "I can jump it." "Of course you can." "Can you?" "I dislike your tone." She crossed in one controlled leap and turned on the other side. Calder jumped. His wet boots slipped on landing. Runa caught both his wrists. For one frightening second, his body swung above the darkness between the carriages. Then she pulled him against her. Calder struck the wall with Runa between him and the steel. Her arms locked around his back. His face ended near her throat. "Still considering annulment?" she asked breathlessly. "I have revised my position." He lifted his head. Rain ran over her green skin and gathered at the edge of one tusk. Her red dress clung to her body beneath his coat. Calder touched her cheek. "You saved my life before you knew my name," he said. "The note said so. You just did it again. I know your name now. Does that improve my value?" Runa's arms remained around him. Significantly. The train entered another curve, pressing their bodies together. Calder kissed her. There were no inspectors watching and no passengers to convince. He kissed her because he wanted to, and Runa answered with a hunger that removed any doubt about what she wanted. Her back met the carriage wall. Calder's hands settled at her waist, then moved carefully along the strong curve of her back. Runa drew him closer by the open collar of his shirt. Rain struck their faces. Wheels thundered beneath them. When her tusk brushed his lip, Calder slowed. Runa followed him, turning the kiss deeper and softer. They separated only when the train whistle screamed above them. "No witnesses," Calder said. "Good. No strategic necessity. Even better." He smiled against her mouth. "Present you as collecting convincing evidence." Runa kissed him once more, quickly. "Locker 7. They continued along the outer walkway. The baggage carriage door was locked, but Runa removed a silver pin from one braid and opened it in less than 10 seconds. "I married a criminal," Calder said. "You married a woman with useful fingers." His thoughts betrayed him. Runa noticed. "Do not say it." "I said nothing. Your face did." They slipped inside. Rows of brass lockers lined the carriage. Luggage shifted behind cargo nets as the train moved. Locker 7 stood at the far end, marked by 2 circular depressions instead of a keyhole. Calder and Runa approached together. Their rings fitted the depressions exactly. "Someone designed this for us," Runa said. "Or we selected the locker after purchasing the rings." They pressed the gold bands against the metal. The lock clicked. Inside lay Calder's brown leather case, Runa's missing knife, and a small phonograph cylinder wrapped in red ribbon. Calder opened the case. It contained a thick ledger sealed with both a human court stamp and an Orc diplomatic mark. Page after page recorded illegal land purchases, railway bribes, dream glass shipments, and payments to the black-badged inspectors. Runa touched the orc seal. "This is why I boarded," she said. "My people lost 3 valleys to forged contracts. I carried the seal needed to prove the records were false." Calder remembered a cold archive room, hidden ledgers, and a friend warning him that the railway syndicate would kill to recover them. "I stole the account book from their central office," he said. "I was taking it to the border magistrate. Separately, they could arrest us. Together, each government protects both of us." Marriage made the evidence untouchable. Runa frowned. "But the note said I accepted before knowing that." Calder held up the phonograph cylinder. "Perhaps this explains." A portable player sat beneath the locker. He fitted the cylinder and turned the small crank. His own voice emerged through the brass horn. "If you are hearing this, we reached the correct locker and forgot everything after Echo Tunnel." Runa moved beside him. The recording continued. "The inspectors planted dream glass among the wedding flowers. We cannot remove it safely before the tunnel. We have decided to let them believe it worked, because they will search our compartment instead of the locker. The ledger must reach the border magistrate at sunrise." There was a pause, followed by Runa's recorded voice. "Calder is making me explain the personal part." In the baggage carriage, Calder looked at her. Runa's eyes widened slightly. Recorded, Calder laughed. "She proposed before we discovered that marriage extended diplomatic protection. She claims it was instinct." "It was a practical instinct," recorded Runa said. "She kissed me for 7 minutes." The clock was slow. Present, Calder covered a smile. Present, Runa closed her eyes. Then the recording became quieter. "We do not know how much the dream glass will remove," Calder's voice said. "If you wake and feel nothing for one another, the marriage can end after the evidence is delivered. Neither of you owes the past a future." Runa's recorded voice followed. "But do not end it from fear. Dance first. Speak honestly. And Calder, if you are listening, yes, I meant the vows." The cylinder stopped. The only sound was the rhythm of the rails. Calder turned toward Runa. "You meant the vows?" "I do not remember them." "Neither do I." "Do you feel nothing?" He stepped closer. "That would be easier." Runa's expression softened with relief. The baggage car door opened behind them. The taller inspector stood on the threshold with a pistol in his gloved hand. His companion entered behind him and locked the door. "Step away from the case," the taller man said. Runa moved in front of Calder. "That position is becoming familiar," Calder murmured. "Be quiet. You said I was brave when it mattered. This is not the moment to test the claim." The inspector aimed the pistol at Runa's chest. "You made this unnecessarily complicated. The dream glass should have removed the location of the ledger." "It removed our wedding," Calder said. "A far more serious offense." The second inspector crossed toward the open locker. Runa shifted her weight. Calder recognized the movement. He had seen it in a forgotten memory, just before she broke a man's wrist with a bottle. "Do not," the armed inspector warned. Runa smiled. "You should have attended the reception." She kicked the brass phonograph player from the floor. It struck the pistol hand. The shot went into the ceiling. Calder drove his shoulder into the second inspector, while Runa caught the first man's wrist. The baggage carriage became a violent confusion of rolling trunks, torn cargo nets, and swinging lamps. The second man punched Calder across the mouth. Calder tasted blood and answered with Runa's knife handle against the man's jaw. Across the carriage, the taller inspector tried to force Runa against the lockers. She lowered her body, lifted him over one shoulder, and threw him onto a pile of luggage. "Remind me never to complain about the bed," Calder said. "You complained?" "Only internally." The second inspector reached for the ledger. Calder caught the case first. The man seized his coat and drove him backward through the connecting door. Calder struck the rail between the carriages. The leather case slipped from his hand and landed on the outer walkway. Rain swept over it. The inspector lunged. Runa came through the door behind him and caught the back of his gray uniform. He turned, swinging a short blade. It cut through the sleeve of Calder's coat and opened a shallow line along Runa's upper arm. Her expression changed. Calder had been frightened before. Now he became angry. He struck the inspector hard enough to send him against the iron wall. Runa took the knife from the man's hand and threw it into the river below. The taller inspector recovered inside the baggage car and reached for the emergency brake. "If he pulls it here, the rear carriages may leave the track," Calder said. Runa released the defeated man and ran inside. The inspector pulled the lever. Calder heard the mechanism engage beneath them. Runa drove both hands against the lever, stopping it halfway. The steel resisted. The train began to scream against the rails. Calder joined her. Together they forced the lever upward until the brake released. The sudden motion threw them to the floor. Runa landed on top of him. For one absurd second, neither seemed aware of the armed inspector staggering toward them. Calder looked up at his wife. "This is how we woke." "Not exactly. Better or worse? Ask later." She rolled aside as the inspector attacked. Calder caught the man's ankle. Runa swept his other leg from beneath him. He fell face first into the open locker, and she shut the brass door on his head without crushing him. The man collapsed unconscious. Calder retrieved the case from the walkway and pulled Runa back inside. Rain had soaked both of them. Blood ran from her arm, bright against green skin. "Sit," he said. "It is shallow." "Runa." Something in his voice stopped her. She sat on a trunk while he tore a clean strip from the lining of his shirt. Calder cleaned the cut with water from a baggage flask and wrapped the cloth around her arm. Runa watched his hands. "You did this before," she said. "When?" "At dinner. One of the men cut my palm. You bandaged it with your handkerchief." She lifted her other hand. Beneath the wedding ring, a faint white strip circled her palm. The memory opened between them. Calder saw Runa sitting at the dining table in her red dress, pretending the wound did not hurt. He saw himself kneeling beside her chair and wrapping her hand. She had teased him for looking worried. He had answered that concern was not the same as weakness. Then Runa had touched his hair. The vision faded. "I remember your hand on my face," Calder said. "I remember wanting to kiss you." "Did you?" "Not then." A tragic delay. Runa covered his hand with hers. "You came back when the knife came out. You could have escaped with the case, but you came back for me." "I did it again." "Yes. Perhaps I am predictable. Perhaps you meant the vows too." Calder tied the bandage and left his fingers resting on her green arm. "Runa, what if the memories return and we discover this was only danger? 4 hours on a train can feel like a lifetime when people are trying to kill you. And what if they do not return? Then we barely know each other." She stood. "You know I carry 3 knives. 1 for each course. You know I hate being called fearless when people use it as permission not to protect me. I know you pretend not to be cold. You know I married you before I knew the legal advantage." Calder looked at her. Runa's confidence faltered. "And I know you make jokes when you are frightened." I know you read laws because knowledge once made you feel safer than people did. I know you watch my mouth before you kiss me, to make certain I have time to refuse. She stepped between his knees as he sat on the trunk. Do not tell me 4 hours cannot be real, she said. We are made of moments. Some simply matter more. Calder placed his hands at her waist. Is this one of them? Decide. He kissed her. Runa's arms came around his neck. The kiss was slower than those before, stripped of urgency and performance. Calder felt her breathing settle against him. His thumb traced the warm skin above the neckline of her dress, and she leaned closer. When they separated, Runa rested her forehead against his. Present me says yes, she whispered. To the kiss? To keeping the ring until sunrise. A generous commitment. Do not ruin it. He kissed her again. The train whistle announced the border valley. They had less than 2 hours before dawn. The conductor arrived with 3 royal guards and found both inspectors tied to a cargo rail with red wedding ribbon. He listened to their explanation, inspected the ledger, and agreed to take the prisoners into custody. The border magistrate is in the observation carriage, he said. But the private salon contains 6 railway officials loyal to these men. They will try to seize the evidence before sunrise. Can you stop the train? Calder asked. Not on the mountain descent. If we break before the valley bridge, we derail. Runa lifted the brown case. Then we reach the magistrate while moving. The conductor handed her a brass key. A service corridor runs beneath the ballroom. It emerges behind the observation carriage. Why did you not mention it earlier? Calder asked. You did not ask. Runa looked at Calder. I like him. You have known him longer than your husband. The conductor smiled and left with the prisoners. Calder and Runa returned briefly to their compartment to change out of their wet clothes. Runa stood behind a folding screen while Calder removed his ruined shirt. The screen ended several inches above the floor and below the ceiling. He could see the silhouette of her powerful body as she slipped the wet red dress from her shoulders. Calder turned toward the window. You are very quiet, Runa said, respectfully. I have seen you without a shirt. You do not remember it. My body may. He dropped a button. Runa laughed softly behind the screen. She emerged wearing fitted black trousers, high boots, and a sleeveless dark green traveling tunic that left her scarred arms bare. Her braids were damp over one shoulder. Calder had changed into a clean cream shirt but had not managed the top buttons. Runa approached him. Allow me. Her green fingers closed the first button, then the second. She stopped at the third. This one should remain open, she said. Strategic? Entirely. Calder gathered her braids and moved them behind her shoulder. His hand followed the line of her pointed ear to the gold chain around her tusk. Does this mean something? He asked. The tusk chain? He nodded. Among my people, gold is worn for a promise accepted. You already had it when you boarded? Runa touched the chain. No. They searched the red dress and found the jeweler's receipt sewn inside the pocket. Calder had purchased the tusk chain at the same time as the wedding rings. On the back, he had written a single sentence, for the promise she chose before the law made it useful. Runa read it, and her eyes filled with a softness that made Calder forget the train, the danger, and the missing hours. Put it on me again, she said. It is already... I want to remember this time. Calder carefully opened the delicate clasp. Runa lifted her chin. He fitted the gold chain around the base of her left tusk and secured it. His fingers lingered near her lower lip. Runa kissed his fingertips. "What promise are you accepting?" he asked. "That we will not end this from fear." Calder's throat tightened. "I can promise that." She drew him into a kiss that was gentle enough to feel like a vow. Then they took the ledger and entered the service corridor beneath the ballroom. The passage was barely tall enough for Calder. Copper pipes ran overhead, filling the confined space with heat and the vibration of the engine. Through narrow grills in the ceiling, they could see boots crossing the ballroom above. Runa moved ahead on hands and knees, the leather case strapped across her back. Calder tried to concentrate on the pipes. "Are you staring?" she asked without turning. "There's nowhere else to look." "The floor is available?" "The floor lacks your charm." She laughed quietly, and another memory returned. Calder saw them beneath a dining table during the first attack. Runa had been crouched in front of him, red skirts gathered around her knees. He had made the same mistake of staring. She had accused him. He had replied that imminent death sharpened his appreciation of beauty. The memory carried warmth, music, and the scent of white roses. "I told you that you were beautiful," he whispered. Runa stopped crawling. "When?" "During the knife fight, beneath a table. That is a terrible moment for courtship." "It worked." She looked back over one green shoulder. "Say it again." Calder moved closer until their faces were inches apart in the narrow passage. "You are beautiful." Her amber eyes held his. "So are you." "Handsome would be sufficient." "Do not be insecure, husband." Runa continued toward the observation carriage before he could answer. They reached the final hatch. Voices sounded above it. The railway officials had gathered in the observation carriage with the border magistrate. Through the grill, Calder saw 6 gray-uniformed men arranged between the magistrate and the door. The officials were insisting that a dangerous orc thief and her human accomplice had stolen railway property. Runa's hand closed around Calder's. "They will claim the marriage is fraudulent," she said. "The certificate has 12 witnesses. They control the witnesses' passage documents. Then we give the magistrate the ledger before they control the story." Runa studied the ceiling. "The hatch opens behind the officials. We may reach the magistrate, but not without being seen. We need a distraction." Music began in the ballroom behind them. Calder smiled. "No," Runa said. "You have not heard the plan. Your face is sufficient." Above the ballroom, the musicians had resumed the wedding melody at the conductor's request. Passengers gathered for an early breakfast, still eager to celebrate the newlyweds. Calder crawled back to the nearest grill and pushed it open. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called from beneath the floor, "my wife and I require one final wedding favor." Runa closed her eyes. The elderly photographer recognized his voice first. "Anything for the groom." When the music reaches the final turn, everyone enter the observation carriage and demand another wedding kiss. The passengers cheered. "You have weaponized romance," Runa said. "Marriage has revealed unexpected talents." The melody continued. Calder and Runa returned to the hatch. At the final turn, the observation car doors opened and 30 passengers crowded inside, applauding and calling for the bride and groom. The railway officials turned toward the disturbance. Runa kicked the hatch open. She rose behind them with the leather case. Calder followed and placed himself between her and the nearest guard. "Magistrate," he called, "the evidence you requested." Runa threw the case. The magistrate caught it against his chest. Gray uniforms moved at once. One man tried to seize the case, but 3 wedding guests blocked him. Another reached for Runa. Calder intercepted the arm, while Runa pushed a dining chair into the path of 2 more. The magistrate broke the dual seals on the ledger. "No one leaves this carriage," he ordered. The authority in his voice stopped even the railway officials. He read the first pages. His expression hardened. "These accounts bear the Treasury cipher," he said. "They document Dreamglass trafficking, treaty violations, and payments to Royal Rail inspectors." "Fabricated," one official said. Runa stepped forward and pressed her Orc diplomatic seal beside the entries. "The land contracts listed here were forged. My seal verifies the original clan records." Calder produced the phonograph cylinder. "And this records the attempted memory attack before it occurred." The conductor entered with the captured inspectors and royal guards. The officials' resistance ended. As guards began making arrests, the train left the mountains and entered the wide border valley. Night thinned beyond the glass ceiling of the observation carriage. A pale line of gold appeared along the eastern horizon. The magistrate closed the ledger. "The evidence is under court protection. Your reciprocal passage is recognized." His eyes dropped to their wedding rings. "The marriage is also valid, assuming neither party contests it." Calder looked at Runa. Every passenger became very quiet. Runa folded her arms. "Must this be decided publicly?" The elderly photographer lifted her camera. "Apparently," Calder said. The magistrate smiled. "You may decide at any time. The train chapel remains available until arrival." He moved away to supervise the prisoners. The passengers followed, though several looked back with open disappointment. Soon Calder and Runa stood alone beneath the observation dome where their first ceremony had occurred. White rose petals still covered the carpet. 2 empty champagne glasses rested near the midnight clock. Beyond the curved glass, dawn spread across green fields and distant rivers. Runa walked to the center of the carriage. "This is where we married," she said. Calder stood beside her. "Do you remember?" "Pieces." He touched his ring to hers. The gold bands warmed. Sunlight entered the observation dome. It struck the dreamglass dust still caught in the wedding roses, turning every gray particle briefly silver. Calder felt pressure behind his eyes. Then the missing night returned. He remembered seeing Runa for the first time in the dining carriage. She had entered wearing red, taller than every human man near her, ignoring the stares as if they were weather. Calder had looked too long. She had caught him and raised one eyebrow. "Have you never seen an Orc woman?" she had asked. Not one who made everyone else in the room disappear. She had called the line terrible. Then she had sat across from him. He remembered their conversation. Runa was carrying her clan's seal to the border court. Calder had concealed the ledger inside a false-bottomed case. Neither trusted the other until the first inspector demanded his luggage and Runa noticed the black glass badge. She had overturned the table before the knife left its sheath. He had returned for her when escape was possible. She had saved him from the second blade. He remembered kneeling beside her chair and bandaging her palm. He remembered the way her expression softened when he admitted he was afraid. He remembered the dance. The carriage lamps had been golden then. Runa wore his coat over the red dress because the observation dome was cold. Calder had held her from behind when the train swayed. "Why did you come back for me?" she had asked. "Because leaving without you felt worse than staying in danger." She had turned in his arms. "You barely know me." "Then stay until I do." Their first kiss had begun carefully. Runa had touched his face as if surprised by his gentleness. Calder had waited for her to close the final distance. She did. The kiss lasted until the musician stopped. Afterward, the conductor explained the reciprocal protection law. Calder offered a strategic marriage, trying to pretend his heart was not already involved. Runa had looked almost offended. "I was going to ask before he explained the law," she said. "Why?" "Because danger makes honest people of us, and I am tired of being dishonest about wanting you." She proposed with one knee on the rose-covered floor and a knife still in her boot. Calder said yes before she completed the question. He remembered purchasing the rings and tusk chain. He remembered their vows. Runa promised never to mistake his gentleness for weakness, and never to make him earn the right to be protected. Calder promised to choose her publicly, privately, and especially when the world asked him to choose what was easier. They kissed beneath midnight fireworks. Then they discovered the dream glass flower and formed the plan to protect the ledger. Every lost moment returned, including the hour in their compartment before the powder entered the ventilation grill. They had not gone to sleep immediately. Runa had removed the red dress and found Calder trying very hard not to watch. She teased him until he admitted that restraint was costing him dearly. They lay together beneath the blanket, kissing and speaking about the future they had no right to imagine after knowing one another for only hours. They stopped before desire became a decision made under the pressure of danger. "After sunrise," Calder had whispered. "If we still want this after forgetting?" "Especially then." The memory ended. Calder returned to the dawn-filled observation carriage with tears in his eyes. Runa stood before him crying openly. He touched her face. "You remembered?" "Everything." "The dance?" "You stepped on my boot twice." "The train moved." "Of course." Calder laughed through the pressure in his chest. Runa covered his hand with hers. "You promised to choose me when the world asked for easier." "I remember." "And after forgetting me, you came back again." "I would keep finding you." Her lower lip trembled beside her tusks. "Then ask me now," she said. Calder looked around. "You proposed the first time. I carried the marriage through the dangerous half of the night. It is your turn." He lowered himself onto one knee among the white roses. Runa smiled down at him, gold tusk chain shining in the first sunlight. "Runa Velstone," he said, "we have known each other for less than one night and more than one lifetime. I loved you when I remembered. I chose you when I did not. Will you remain my wife? Not because the law protects us, but because I cannot imagine reaching any destination without you." Runa reached down and pulled him to his feet. "Yes," she said, "before you make the speech longer." She kissed him. Morning flooded the glass carriage around them. Calder lifted Runa at the waist, and she wrapped both arms around his neck. Their wedding rings touched against his cheek. The passengers had been watching through the door. They erupted into applause. Runa broke the kiss and looked over Calder's shoulder. "I thought we were alone." "We have never been alone on this train. Our next wedding will be private." "How many are you planning?" Her amber eyes returned to his. "As many as it takes to make you remember." 6 months later, the railway syndicate's directors were convicted of treaty fraud, unlawful dream glass trafficking, and attempted murder. The stolen valleys were returned to Runa's people. Calder's ledger became the foundation of a new agreement, protecting every border traveler, regardless of blood or title. Calder and Runa remained married. They rented a sunlit house halfway between the human capital and the first Orc Valley because neither would admit that the other's homeland was more beautiful. Runa filled the entrance with boots and hidden knives. Calder filled every remaining wall with books. They argued about shelf space, breakfast, and whether 3 blades were truly necessary for a walk through the garden. They never argued about the marriage. On the first anniversary of the forgotten wedding, They boarded the Midnight Express again. The conductor had reserved the same compartment. A bouquet of harmless white roses waited on the table beside 2 gold-edged tickets. Runa inspected every flower for black glass. "Satisfied?" Calder asked. "Nearly." She locked the door. The compartment had not grown larger. There was still 1 narrow berth, 1 blue night lamp, and barely enough room for 2 adults who had become very good at sharing space. Runa wore a deep red traveling dress. Calder unfastened its small black hooks one at a time while she watched him through the mirror. "Your hands are shaking," she said. The hooks remained threatening. "Liar." He kissed the green skin at the base of her neck. Runa turned and drew him toward the berth by his open collar. This time there were no inspectors outside, no evidence to protect, and no reason to stop at the promise they had made before sunrise. Later, Calder woke beneath the blanket with Runa's arm around his waist and her head resting against his shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked at their joined hands. The matching rings shone in the blue light. Runa stirred. "Who are you?" she asked sleepily. Calder smiled. "Your husband." Her amber eyes opened. "Do you remember the wedding?" He turned in her arms and kissed her slowly. "Every one of them." Outside, the Midnight Express carried them toward dawn. Not as strangers trapped by a forgotten choice, but as 2 people who had chosen each other twice, remembered it all, and intended to keep choosing for the rest of the journey.